Hello, everybody. It's Kato here, and I'm giving you my impressions from today's Switch event. This is some of what the Switch event looks like. Sorry for the quality of this. This is from when I went live earlier today while I was at the event, went Facebook Live. Turn that down a little bit. Alright, so this event was pretty cool. They had a ton of games. They had Bomberman, as you can see there. They had a bunch of setups where you can get a really good look at the Switch. It looks really clean and very well designed. And that was one of the things I noticed the most was for the first time in a while, I feel like this console is very well designed. Um, I guess what I mean by that is just the Joy-Cons are very clean. The uh, the screen itself and the console itself is very sleek, and there's not a lot of extra doodads to it. It feels nice and weighty. This video's not that great, but they had a bunch of different locations. Let me just skip around here a bit. Here is a picture, well, a close-up of one of the switches in mobile mode. Here is the Switch in two-player mode. Here's a setup they had that showed how you could play this on an airplane, although, quite frankly, that is the biggest... What airplane has fucking that much legroom? No airplane. But, I mean, they just wanted to show off their hardware. They need to be obvious, but as long as you have a tray table, obviously this is like it's a very good size. The screen is just the right size so that you can sit away from it, a couple feet, and you can still see what's happening on the screen. Of course, if you're in mobile mode, you don't have to even sit away from it. You can just hold it in your hand like a DS and put it right as close as you need it to be. But it's also good for multiplayer. Like, you just take the Joy-Cons out, hand one to a buddy next to you, and you can both play Mario Kart, which is what this setup was right here. Mario Kart setup, as you can see. Splatoon 2. So these systems over here, I didn't actually get to play them, unfortunately. Took too long. Let me skip ahead. Here you can see the Splatoon players. A lot of them, half of them on Splatoon. Oh, let me back up a little bit. Uh, Splatoon, under Splatoon players, you can see some of them on this side, for example, were using the screen in mobile mode. And on this side of this display, you can see that they're using the Pro controller. Now, this person's actually using, yeah, the Pro controller, which is more like your standard controller, but you have to buy it separately. I didn't get it up close with the Pro controllers, but apparently they also have gyroscopes in them, so you can still use some of the move functionality. But they look kind of like your standard controllers. They're slightly translucent plastic. They're bringing back that old, like the Game Boy Clear, bringing some of that back. So here's the beginning of my Zelda footage. You can see here, this is the Joy-Con grip, as it's called. Let's get a good look at the Joy-Con. This felt very nice. It wasn't too weighty. It was lighter than most controllers. And I know the square form factor seems a little odd, but the way that the Joy-Cons sit in the grip, it actually felt really good in my hand. It felt like ergonomically, I had no issues with it. Now, then again, I only played it for a small amount of time, so that stains, but like for my about 20 minutes ish that I got to play the game, it felt fine. Um, you can see here on the back, there's two buttons right under the triggers. That's how you get the Joy-Cons out. They slide in very easily. We have Link waking up. Wake up, Link. Yo, wake up, buddy. Put on some clothes. Alright. Yeah, at this point, he's mentioning that this game, this time around, you can actually climb as Link. You can climb up walls. You'll see that a little bit later. But it's definitely, it was definitely interesting to have a kind of more open traversal of the world, and that's one of the first things I did immediately, actually. Skip ahead a little here. So here we're playing a bit, getting out. Sorry, I was holding both the Joy-Con. Here's the Joy-Con. Uh, you can see on the top there are two buttons. Those are when you use the Joy-Con on its own. It feels like an L and R button. So basically, this is in essence like a mini SNES controller, right? You have your stick instead of a D-pad, then the four face buttons, and then an L and R. And there's a lot of games that come with multiplayer where you can use just one Joy-Con on its own as an entire controller, meaning that the game the Switch essentially comes with two controllers in the box. Um, Now, for more complicated games like Splatoon, I believe you need both Joy-Cons. But there are going to be a lot of multiplayer games that you can play in local multiplayer, split screen even, with one Joy-Con for each person, which is very interesting that they decided to do that. They mentioned during their Switch presentation that the original Famicom came with two controllers as well. It's the original Nintendo Entertainment System in Japan. Each of the sticks also click in. They're buttons, kind of like you're used to seeing on most modern controllers. Um, Again, sorry this footage isn't really dead on. I took the Joy-Cons out of the grip, which you can see there, just under the TV, and I'm holding one in each hand, and I'm also holding my phone in my left hand alongside. Um, must shine upon Hyrule once again. I'm holding a Joy-Con and a phone in my left side. Uh, there was voice acting just then, and that's bizarre. Just haven't been full voice acting in a Zelda game. So this is one of the traversal things that I was mentioning earlier. As you can see there, you can just climb up walls now. I don't know if that's every single wall ever, but I tried to climb up a cliff and I was able to do it. Very cool shot. Long sweeping shot. Sorry for the shakiness. I kept almost dropping my phone, but I really wanted to get some footage. Alright. So there's that little guy. I actually don't go towards that guy at first. Um, so this game has equipment. I didn't show it earlier, but I did dress up. Link. When you saw the opening of the... Oops, sorry about that. When you saw the opening, I was definitely naked, and there was some stuff that I could equip. As you can see, you can equip here. Use weapons. So this stick Like I swung it around like a sword. Um, in this, like in most Zeldas, you can equip different items, but in this game, you can equip different weapons as just like regular weapons. So normally in Zelda games, you would have your main sword weapon, and then you would have different other items. Um, this one seems different. This one is like you just equip things. You know, there's no difference really between your sword and other items. They're all just equipable items. Um, so as you can see there, I was just climbing up a tree, and now I can also just what essentially looks like a wall that you shouldn't be able to interact with. You can just climb straight up, and you can actually hop. I'll start hopping here on this next part, and you can traverse it pretty quickly. Whoop! And then let's see. Let's skip ahead a little bit. Um, so I'm in a cold area. There's a small on the right side of the screen. You see a small circle with a red and blue side to them. That's actually a thermometer that judges how cold Link feels. So when you're in the game, depending on what location you're on, you're gonna either be cold or hot or just fine. And apparently, you just get different clothes to mitigate that sort of stuff. There's a lot of kind of things that we've come to see in other open world games, systems set in place that you have to manage. So in this game, uh, that circle that's on top of the two that you see on the right hand of the screen, the top circle is your temperature that you have to make sure you're not too cold or too hot. The one under it is how much noise you're making. So you can actually sneak in this game. If you make Link crouch, you can walk around slowly. You can see there, Link looks cold. He's shivering, and then you start to take damage the longer you're in there. Um, what's really impressive to me is that this game was. I mean, it didn't do much in it, but it felt really nice what I did play of it. And I was also holding a phone while using the Joy-Con, and my experience wasn't that negatively impacted, which I think says something for how comfortable the Joy Cons really are. Even though they're small, they work. It works, um, despite the fact that that they're not that big. They fit correctly. Trying to get some apples. So also in this game, instead of getting hearts, you get food, and you can eat food in order to heal, which is again so another system that you're trying to manage. You have to manage. Here. So you take the Joy Cons, slide them down, and pull it up, and boom, now it is in mobile mode. So as you can see there, the transition is very quick. The screen on this is very bright, and I asked him whether or not there were brightness controls, and he says obviously in the full version there will be brightness controls, but the brightness was turned way up, and it looked very crisp. So here you get a good shot of the Switch in mobile mode. So you gotta plug in a headphone up top. There's also an AC jack on the top, and there's a USB-C on the bottom. This felt really good to hold. Like, the size was just right. I think technically it's a tiny bit smaller than the Wii U gamepad. It's very thin, but it doesn't feel frail. The only thing I worry about this is if you're trying to, I wouldn't throw this in a backpack because it is still a touch screen. Um, and you wouldn't want the Joy Cons like the Joy Cons feel secure and like they're nested very well into the sides of the Switch, but that's still kind of a point of maybe easy breakage. If you like toss this into a backpack or something, I would worry about that. It doesn't feel flimsy. It just feels like, I mean, that's just a natural point where it might be a little bit weaker. You wouldn't want to snap those off on accident. I've seen some cases online already, so that shouldn't be too much of a problem. Just put it in a case and it'll be fine. You know, you take it wherever you want. Um, it was not too heavy, which is good because if you want a mobile thing, you don't want it to be too heavy. It felt a tiny bit heavier than my 3DS XL, um, but not anything that would matter even for long gaming sessions. And it felt very easy to hold in one hand. So there's the size comparison. That's a DS XL. So it's a little bit bigger with the Joy-Cons. It's the same size. The screen is the same size as an XL, but it is much, much thinner than a 3DS. I would say about a third of the thickness of a 3DS because I mean, it's just one screen instead of two, obviously. It doesn't clamshell in any way. In mobile mode, this felt very good to hold. Uh, in general, the ergonomics of it, although I know it seems weird. The first thing I thought was it seemed very strange. Um, but it felt great in my hands. It felt very good. To be fair, I am 5'7". I don't have giant hands. I have kind of small hands, but I've heard that even with people with average sized hands, it still feels good. I think they just got the placement of the buttons right and the shape. It fits in your hands very nicely, despite the size. Um, so I was talking to this guy here, and he didn't have a voice. So there's only voice acting sometimes, obviously like cutscenes and stuff. So yeah, that's all my footage for Legend of Zelda. This is that other game I was talking about from before, Snipper Clips. So this looks very interesting. Um, kind of, I think there's a good summation of some of the like playfulness that they're going with, and the kind of co-op feel that they're going with the Switch. So this is only in co-op, and you can see here, each person has their own controller, and they're playing on the tablet, so on the Switch on its own. You could plug the Switch in, still be using the Joy-Cons individually, and play this on your TV. But this setup was obviously to show off the little kickstand, which you can see there. So again, the Joy-Cons, while their size were small, it didn't seem like too bad to hold. I know in some of those images where the official people are holding them, it looks a little awkward. But I thought that it felt great. Overall, my impressions of the Switch are like this system is going to do what it's going to do very well. And what it's going to do is give Nintendo a platform to have their cake and eat it too, basically. They're gonna be able to make they're gonna be able to make kind of core games, like the kind of games that a lot of older fans are into. Their Zeldas, their Mario's, the maybe we'll get a new Metroid, who knows, but the kind of games that people kind of felt like were getting pushed to the wayside with their last two consoles because the last two consoles were based solely in gimmick, solely in motion controls. So then everything had to be motion controls, and then they tried to fix those problems. But for both of those and the hard and like the core crowd, I feel like a lot of people ended up skipping the Wii U, especially because it just felt like the gimmick wasn't worth uh, the money, basically. For this, I feel like the gimmick is actually very I mean, it's something that we've all kind of dreamed of, and handhelds like the the Vita, for example, tried to do that, tried to take a core gaming experience on the road. And part of the issue with that was that it was they had to develop differently for the Vita, right? And it was much too expensive. And that's part of the brilliance of the Switch is that it's kind of it's a two-in-one. It is powerful enough to be a home console, and yet portable enough when you put it into mobile mode to be a handheld. Now, because it's kind of like a tablet, because it's kind of like it's pretty expensive, I wouldn't say that this is going to replace your 3DS. I would say this is an addition to your mobile gaming. Personally, don't see myself playing this on the subway, for example, just because of the size of it. It's a little too big. Well, I don't know. I don't like people watching me play it. However, for trips, getting on a plane, getting on the train, uh, long road trips, for that sort of long travel, it seems perfect. Maybe you want to continue a game, or like maybe not for commutes. There's some examples in the Switch release trailer that show a person just like going out to take their dog, but they were in the middle of Zelda, so they just take the Switch with them. Like for those sort of kind of small use cases, it's great. It works really well. Switching between mobile and home mode is super easy and super quick. It just does it. They made it so I mean, it's kind of idiot proof. Basically, it makes sense when you hold it in your hand and you slide it into the dock. It just happens. It just goes, and I think that's the strength of the Switch. Right? It's gonna be a very good home console that you can sometimes take with you when you want to, when you need to. Um, I have a feeling that they're going to want to keep around the 3DS. Obviously, because it has two screens and a touch screen, the 3DS kind of has a different sort of development going for it, and the Switch has to be one screen, and it can't always be touch, even though the screen is a touch screen, apparently. But that means that only some games are going to be able to use that. Anyways, I'm kind of rambling. I've been rambling for a bit, but those are my impressions. I'm gonna get one, I think for sure. It's kind of up to how much you like Nintendo games. Like, but this, it seems like they're refocusing. Like sure there are some gimmick games, but even the gimmick games seem really interesting. Um, for example, if you haven't seen it, it's called 1-2 Switch. You should look up the trailer for it. There is basically a set of mini games that you play without looking at the screen. You just look at the other person that's playing. The screen gives you prompts through audio mostly, and you play a bunch of mini games. It's kind of like if you've ever played Johann Sebastian Joust, which was a PlayStation Move game. Not a lot of people got to play that game because it was PlayStation Move, and not a lot of PlayStation Moves were really sold. But it's a game that you play with controls and with a video game console, but the objective happens in kind of real space. So, for example, one of the games is a shooting game, dueling game, where you hold the Joy-Con at your side and you look at your opponent, and then you have to draw and shoot, and whoever shoots first and shoots correctly, it actually has a very advanced gyroscope in it. It can tell the angle of how you're pointing the Joy-Con. So you have to shoot correctly. You have to make sure not to hit hit the trigger too early, or else you'll just shoot the ground. Um, but the way this is different than their old motion games was by separating it from the screen and having it be more about player versus player interaction. They kind of get rid of that weird disconnect that motion games sometimes had, where the motion wasn't quite one to one, and it felt strange sometimes to try to connect. It felt strange sometimes to try to. It felt strange sometimes to try to. Um, and it felt strange sometimes to try to. It felt sa- it felt strange sometimes to try to reconnect. No, it felt strange sometimes. It felt strange sometimes to control motion controls because um, it wasn't um, it wasn't always one to one, basically. So by taking out the video component of some of these motion controls, uh, it essentially makes it so that you're just kind of playing, like you would if you would play cops and robbers with your friends. Like it was all make believe, and that's fun. And this adds kind of a layer of recordability to a layer of kind of inventiveness, right? Like a layer of imagination, but like there's still a winner because the game recorded who actually shot first, right? Um, so that's very interesting to me. I think it's kind of a gimmick, but because of the way this console is designed, that gimmick isn't the be all end all of the console. They made it configurable in so many ways that you can make games for their motion control gimmicks. You can make games that completely 100% ignore those motion control gimmicks and are still good because the hardware is up to par now. All the games that I saw were 720p running at 60 frames per second, which I'd rather 720 60 frames than 180p, 1080p rather, and 30 frames anyways. But it holds 720p on the TV and on the console itself, which I would say is good for a small console like that. Anyways, I'm rambling again. Uh, I think those are all my thoughts. If you have a question or would like to know something more, leave a comment down below. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you all next time.